Just as my mother-in-law went over to the couple to get the Tupperware, my father-in-law suddenly collapsed and fell out of his chair. Everyone turned to look at him, and he was holding his stomach, clearly in a lot of pain. "What's wrong with you?" someone asked. My father-in-law then said something that surprised me. "I just ate a little bit of food from the kitchen. Why is my stomach suddenly upset?" I didn't miss my mother-in-law's comment either. "My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a 20-year-old housewife. My husband Vernon and I got married last year. We're the same age, so we have similar conversations and values. Because of that, we get along really well, and we're just as in love now as we were before we started dating. However, there was one thing that bothered me a little after we got married. When we went to visit my in-laws to give our wedding greetings, I noticed that my mother-in-law was a bit old-fashioned. She said, 'When you get married, you come to your house and live with us, right?' She asked as if it was a given. My husband and I both replied at the same time, 'What?' We had no intention of doing that. So my husband said, 'No, we're planning to live on our own after getting married.' My mother-in-law replied, 'What? But you're the eldest son.' Both my husband and I were troubled by this. Then my father-in-law stepped in and said, 'That's an old-fashioned way of thinking. Do whatever you want, Vernon and Elizabeth.' His words helped calm my mother-in-law down. But there was another issue that made things even more uncomfortable. Neither my husband nor I had planned to have a wedding ceremony. We didn't like anything too fancy and thought it would be better to use the money for travel instead. When I told my in-laws about this, my mother-in-law's face turned pale again. "How can you not have a wedding?" she asked. As I mentioned earlier, my mother-in-law is very traditional, so she was strongly against our idea of skipping the wedding. She was worried about how to explain to the relatives that the eldest son wouldn't have a wedding. In her mind, the eldest son is the most important, so she couldn't accept anything that didn't fit her beliefs. But again, my father-in-law came to our rescue. He said, "None of the relatives care about the wedding. They just see it as a chance to have a nice meal. After a while, they'll forget there wasn't a wedding." My father-in-law said, "If you decide not to have a wedding, that's fine." He was very kind and respected our decision, which saved us from being pressured into following my mother-in-law's old-fashioned ideas. However, my mother-in-law wasn't happy about it. So we got married without a wedding and started living on our own. I became a housewife to support my husband. I feel very happy doing housework and making lunch and dinner for him every day. I think it will be even more enjoyable when we have children someday. About 2 months after our marriage, my parents-in-law asked my husband if he would like to visit them. My husband and I had had some disagreements with my mother-in-law, so we were a little worried. But we hadn't visited their house since getting married, so we decided we should visit them. I was worried that my mother-in-law might try to bully me, but surprisingly, she didn't. In fact, she was very kind. "If you have any questions about being a housewife, you can always ask me," she said. "I have lots of recipes and I'll teach you everything I know." My mother-in-law loves to cook and often invites neighbors over for home parties, which she says are very popular. That day, I had a home-cooked meal prepared by my mother-in-law, and it was delicious. Both my father-in-law and mother-in-law were very kind, and I realized I didn't need to worry as much as I had. My husband felt the same way and thought it would be fine to visit his parents once in a while. About 3 months later, my parents-in-law invited us to a dinner party at their house. Since our last visit had gone so well, we were happy to go. This time, my mother-in-law served food that looked like it came from an expensive restaurant. My husband even complimented her, saying, "You're getting better and better at cooking. You didn't make anything like this when I was a kid. This meal is really delicious. Thank you for preparing so many amazing dishes." My mother-in-law smiled happily when I thanked her and told me to eat a lot. I had a great time. But that night, I had a terrible stomachache. While I was sitting in the bathroom, I started feeling faint and weak. "Hey Elizabeth, are you okay?" I heard my husband's voice, but it faded away. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My husband had called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. The doctors said they couldn't figure out what was wrong. It wasn't food poisoning or anything like that. I thought maybe there was too much olive oil in the pasta I had for lunch, but I never found out what caused it. After getting an IV drip and some rest, I started feeling better. My husband and I went home and went to bed. I couldn't understand what was going on, but I didn't have any more symptoms after that. However, 2 months later, the same thing happened again. Suddenly, I felt sick. The only thing that was the same as last time was that it happened after eating my mother-in-law's cooking at my in-laws' house. I wondered if my mother-in-law's food was spoiled, but my husband, who ate the same food, was completely fine. Then, a month later, it happened again after we had dinner at my in-laws' house. I invited a friend over for lunch to talk about why this kept happening to me. "Isn't that coming from stress?" she suggested. Her words made me a bit nervous. I thought I was being completely trusting and open-minded, but maybe I was feeling a bit anxious around my mother-in-law without realizing it. After all, I was getting sick every time we visited my in-laws' house, so my husband was worried too. He suggested that we stop visiting my parents-in-law's house for a while. "I don't know the cause, but this always happens when we eat at my parents-in-law's house," he said. He thought it might have something to do with my mother-in-law's cooking. I wondered if that could really be the case. After that, my mother-in-law contacted my husband several times, inviting us to dinner. He always refused, thinking of me. But after a while, we got another invitation that we couldn't refuse. My brother-in-law and his wife were coming to my in-laws' house to give their wedding greetings. I felt a bit down because I had been feeling better by avoiding visits to my in-laws' house. My husband reassured me, saying I didn't have to eat much. So I decided to eat as little as possible. When the day of the party arrived, my mother-in-law was as kind as ever. As long as we talked normally, I didn't feel sick. I started to wonder if maybe there was something wrong with the food after all. A little later, my brother-in-law and his wife arrived, and we had a nice conversation with them. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was preparing the dishes with great skill, and more food was being laid out on the table. Her home-cooked meals looked as beautiful and delicious as ever. In fact, the food I had eaten before tasted really good, so I still couldn't understand why I was getting sick. As soon as we sat down, my mother-in-law encouraged me to eat. "Elizabeth, you said you liked this dish, didn't you?" she asked. "I made it very delicious today, so please try it," my mother-in-law said. I didn't know what to do. Then my husband stepped in and said, "Elizabeth isn't feeling well today, so let her eat only what she can when she can." But my mother-in-law responded, "Well then, this small amount should be fine, right?" She placed a small plate with less food in front of me. While I was unsure of what to do, my brother-in-law spoke up, "Elizabeth, if you're not feeling well, you don't have to force yourself. We've already greeted each other, so if you feel sick, don't hesitate to go home and rest." It seemed my husband had told his brother and sister-in-law about everything, and they were trying to help me. My mother-in-law realized she couldn't force me to eat her food, so she said, "Well then, I'll put it in a Tupperware for you to take home." I couldn't help but wonder why she was so eager for me to eat it. I figured that if I took the food home, I didn't have to eat it right away, so I said, "Okay, thank you very much." As my mother-in-law went to get the Tupperware, my father-in-law suddenly collapsed and fell off his chair. We all turned to look at him, and he was holding his stomach, clearly in a lot of pain. "What's wrong with you?" someone asked. He hadn't even touched the food on the table yet. Then my father-in-law said something surprising. "I just ate a little bit of food from the kitchen. Why is my stomach suddenly upset?" I did miss my mother-in-law's comment, "Did you eat some of that?" My husband immediately called an ambulance, and my mother-in-law went with my father-in-law to the hospital. We were all stunned, left at my in-laws' house. But I couldn't stop thinking about what my mother-in-law had said earlier. It seemed that my brother-in-law's wife had noticed something too. We started to wonder if there might be a secret in the kitchen. We decided to check the kitchen where my mother-in-law had been. We found something surprising. We then drove to the hospital where my father-in-law was taken. As soon as we got through the reception desk, we went to his room and heard voices inside. The doctor was asking my mother-in-law if she knew what was wrong with my father-in-law. She said she had no idea. When we entered the room, my mother-in-law looked flustered. "Oh, you guys came all the way here. It's all right. As long as I'm here, it will be fine," she said. But we weren't going to miss this chance. I told her I needed to talk to her and walked up to her, with my husband, my brother-in-law, and his wife following me. "What's going on with you guys?" I asked. My father-in-law's condition seemed to have stabilized and his color looked normal, but they still didn't know the cause. Apparently, he had been conscious for a while after arriving at the hospital and had gone to the bathroom several times. He became dehydrated and lost consciousness completely. I looked my mother-in-law straight in the eye, took something out of my bag, and showed it to her. When she saw it, she got upset. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. She replied, Well, what is it?" trying to act like she didn't know. "This is a laxative," I said. I found a lot of powdered laxatives in the kitchen. My mother-in-law fell silent. The doctor then said, "It seems he had these symptoms because he ingested a lot of laxatives. We'll run some tests to be sure. If we find laxative leaves, I'll need to ask him when he ingested them. If he doesn't know, it means someone must have given it to him intentionally, which would be a serious charge." Hearing this, my mother-in-law suddenly panicked. "No, it's not like that," she said. "I didn't try to make him eat that food. It was just negligence." My husband reacted strongly to what my mother-in-law said. "Who were you trying to feed that to?" he asked. My mother-in-law climbed up and said, "You're not going to let this go, so we'll have to call the police to investigate." When my husband said that, my mother-in-law admitted everything. It was all for Elizabeth. I was trying to punish her by feeding her laxatives. "What do you mean, punish me? What did I do to deserve this?" I asked. "Since my son married you, he's become a bad son. You didn't live with us and you didn't have a wedding. You persuaded him to do all of this, so you're my enemy." I told her, "That's just unjustified resentment." "Is that why you've been putting laxatives in my food? It wasn't just a little before. That's why I ended up in the emergency room. How can you say it was just a small amount?" My husband and brother-in-law agreed with me and blamed my mother-in-law. "I can't forgive you for what you did to Elizabeth," my husband said. "I'd be furious too if someone did this to my future wife." In response, my husband and brother-in-law declared that they were disowning my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law started to panic and begged my husband and brother-in-law not to disown her. Then my father-in-law, who had woken up and heard the whole conversation, spoke up. "You've done a terrible thing out of your ego. You should be arrested by the police. I'm so disappointed in you." Even as she pleaded, my father-in-law continued, "You're going to pay Elizabeth $30,000. Of course you'll have to work for it. I won't help you in any way." "No, it's impossible," she protested. "I've been a stay-at-home mom my whole life." "Shut up," he said. "If you don't agree to these terms, I'll divorce you immediately and report you to the police." My mother-in-law had no choice but to agree to work and pay me $30,000. Now she's working hard and paying me little by little. My father-in-law keeps a close eye on her to make sure she doesn't cheat, and all her salary goes towards this payment. She seems very overwhelmed, but I think she deserves it for what she did to me. Meanwhile, my husband and I are living happily. My husband and father-in-law have told me that I don't have to see my mother-in-law again. I feel much better now, knowing that with my husband and father-in-law by my side, I'll be okay no matter what happens. Feeding someone food containing laxatives is indeed a serious crime. It's shocking that a mother-in-law would do something like that so thoughtlessly. One might wonder why such a person was married to her father-in-law. But it seems that her two sons turned out well, so perhaps there was a time when she was different. Whatever the reasons, the punishment seems fair. I hope she works hard to pay the $30,000 to Elizabeth, and I wish Elizabeth and her husband a happy and peaceful life together. I have been married for 3 years to a kind husband. We were very close, but we didn't have any children yet. We were both looking forward to the day we would have kids until the accident happened. Please listen to this unbelievable story. My husband was kind to everyone, not just me. My parents loved him too. I have a sister who is very focused on her career, and my husband got along with her as well. Suddenly, my husband's work got really busy. He started coming home late and even working on his days off. He was put in charge of a team and was always on his phone, talking to his team members. Looking back, people might have thought, "Isn't that suspicious?" But I didn't suspect anything. I just worried about his health. Then my sister, who lived alone, got a new job and needed to move. She wanted to buy new furniture, so I planned to take her shopping in my car. On the day we planned to go shopping, which was a Saturday, I got called into work by my boss. This was the only day off for my sister. As I thought about what to do, I realized that my husband also had the day off. My husband had been busy with work lately, but I decided to ask him to take my place. Seeing the trouble I was in, he agreed and said, "It's a bit awkward to go out with your sister alone, but it's fine. My car is being repaired, so can I borrow yours? I was grateful for his help and went to my office to deal with the problem there. It was the first time my husband and my sister went out alone together. I wondered if they were doing well and if they had found the right furniture. When I finished handling the issue at work, it was already dark. I took out my cell phone to call my husband and sister for dinner. That's when I received a call from an unknown number. "Hello, am I speaking to John's family member?" a stranger asked. "Yes, I'm his wife," I replied. "This is the police. Your husband has been in an accident." The man who identified himself as a police officer informed me. He told me that the car my husband was driving had been in an accident and that both he and his female passenger were unconscious. I don't remember exactly what I did when I heard the news, but I rushed to the hospital. At the emergency reception, I gave them my name and was taken to the ICU. Through the glass window, I could see my husband connected to various tubes and wrapped in bandages. I was very worried about what would happen to him. My mother, who lived far away, arrived later, and we spent a worried night together. During this time, the police told us more about the accident. They said John had been driving on a road with clear visibility when a car ran a red light and hit him. The other driver was seriously injured and was also being treated at the same hospital. However, the driver said that John's car had been moving strangely before the accident. The police were investigating whether my husband had fallen asleep at the wheel. Within a few days, my husband and sister regained consciousness, and the doctors did some tests. My mother and I were called in to hear the results. The doctors told us that although they would survive, they would likely have some kind of disability. Despite this, my mother and I were happy they were alive and hoped they would improve with rehabilitation. We didn't tell them about the possible disabilities. My mother and I only shared positive news and took care of them. My mother looked after my sister, and I took care of my husband. At first, my husband was in shock from the accident and was feeling unwell. He was also worried about the trouble he had caused for me, my mother, and my sister. But as time went by, my husband, who had always been kind to me, started to change. He became frustrated with his leg that didn't move easily, the hospital treatment, and the fact that he had to quit his job. All of this seemed to make him very irritable. Even though he couldn't control his frustration, I still went to the hospital every day because I understood how he felt and wanted to support him. One day, a police detective visited me at the hospital. He explained that they had discovered something about the accident. It appeared that there had been a brake oil leak in my car, which was involved in the crash. This issue could have led to an accident at any time, possibly explaining why the car behaved strangely before the crash. The woman who collided with us was also in bad condition. Her mother came to apologize, and it was the first time I met her. After this, I noticed my husband's outburst towards me increased. He resented my ability to move freely while he was immobile. He also seemed irritated when I could only visit briefly due to my work commitments. He began giving me orders and directing his frustrations at me if I didn't meet his expectations. He threw things and complained about his hospital room, even objecting when I went out to get my own lunch. His demands became more unreasonable over time. I sympathized with his situation, but I had to work to support us financially and handle numerous responsibilities like liaising with the police and managing hospital communications. I barely had time to catch my breath. My husband's behavior became increasingly intolerable, and I felt trapped. My sister seemed to be struggling similarly, and my mother grew more exhausted by the day. I heard that my sister's demands on our mother, who wasn't employed, were becoming overwhelming as well. When I couldn't make it to the hospital, both my husband and sister seemed to have learned about the possibility of remaining paralyzed despite rehabilitation. Then there was the revelation about my car's brake oil leak. My sister said, "Hey, I heard your car was leaking oil. You were responsible for maintaining it. Now I can't work or recover properly because of this. Mom seems upset, and your husband is in the same situation. You're now responsible for caring for both of us for the rest of your life." My sister's accusations caught me off guard. I called my mother, who explained that my sister had been struggling mentally for a while. She also mentioned being too tired to go to the hospital. Despite this, I remained worried about my husband and went to see him at the hospital. When I didn't find him in his room, I discovered him with my sister in the common area. Visiting hours were almost over, and they were sitting together alone in the otherwise empty room. "Hey, I heard that if you had just taken the car in for inspection, none of this would have happened," my husband said, glaring at me. "Yeah, But you're the reason why your sister and I are in this mess, he continued. The insurance will cover it, and now you're stuck taking care of us for the rest of our lives. Don't forget that. His words hit me hard, and something inside me snapped. Since when did you two get so close? I asked sharply. What do you mean? He replied defensively. You don't visit that often, and your mom texted your sister to come over since we can't leave here, and we can't walk. What's wrong with me talking to your sister? It felt like my husband and sister were teaming up against me. Sure, I retorted sarcastically. You guys hadn't seen each other for ages before the accident, right? What are you talking about? I'm talking about you taking care of us. You know that, my husband said, brushing off my question. My sister didn't even look at me but nodded along when my husband said that I would be caring for them both for the rest of their lives. I didn't expect a response, but I continued speaking, hoping they might understand my feelings. I wonder if the person who hit your car is recovering now, I said. How should I know? She crashed into us when the light was red. It's just unbelievable, my husband replied. Yeah, it was terrifying. We definitely need to make sure we get compensation from her. And this happened right when I was about to get a promotion. My sister chimed in. If I didn't interrupt, they would just keep complaining, so I decided it was time to tell the truth. There's something you both need to know, I began. What is it? My husband asked. Firstly, I did have my car inspected before the accident, I revealed. Did you? Then the dealership should be held accountable. They must have known about the brake oil leak, he responded. I agree. So right after the accident, the police contacted me. They wanted to determine the cause and asked to check my dashcam footage. But that old dashcam doesn't record audio, and it only starts recording after an accident, so it wouldn't show anything useful, he argued. I understand your concern. However, you weren't aware that I had recently installed a new dashcam, I disclosed. My sister looked up in surprise. What? She exclaimed. As the truth unfolded, my sister's face turned ashen. I also installed an interior camera, I continued calmly. Modern dashcams can start recording with even a slight jolt. The police have already reviewed the footage. My husband appeared bewildered, and my sister looked on the verge of collapsing. You were hiding something, weren't you? I confronted her directly. I don't understand, she stammered. You tampered with the car. My husband started to panic. How can you accuse my sister like that? You're talking to her as if she's your enemy. Suddenly, he fell silent, clearly shaken. I mentioned earlier that even a slight movement would trigger the recording. So many private moments between you two were captured. I was mortified when the police asked if it was my sister who was in the car with me. My husband turned pale. You've been having an affair all this time. I trusted you completely. Caught in the middle, my husband began to shift blame onto my sister. Mary isn't the only one responsible here. At that moment, the mother of the woman who had crashed into my car arrived at the hospital room. I had invited her to come over. Don't you have something to say to her? I asked pointedly. My sister was caught off guard by the presence of the small, tearful woman. Wait, who's this? She asked, bewildered. She's the mother of the woman who crashed into us. She should be taking responsibility for all of this, I clarified. My husband, who had been speaking, fell silent upon seeing the woman's tears. She's the mother of the woman who crashed into us. Her name is Alice, I added, hearing the woman's name. My husband turned pale, and my sister began to panic. What? Who is she? Do you know the woman who was driving? So they knew it was your car, and she crashed into it? My husband asked, clearly taken aback. Seeing my husband struggling, I decided to explain the situation to my sister. She was having an affair with John. He had promised her a divorce, but he didn't follow through. When Alice claimed she was pregnant with his child, John insisted she get an abortion. After that, he cut off contact with her, and she wanted revenge by hurting me. Wait, so that means, my sister began to piece it together. Yes, you were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, I confirmed. I can't believe this has ruined everything, my sister lamented. The truth is, crying or shouting won't change anything now, I said, pouring out my emotions. Now you both understand what happened. You had an affair behind my back, and Mary tried to harm me by tampering with the brake oil in my car. But she ended up in an accident herself. I'm the victim in all of this. I continued, I was willing to work things out and not divorce you if you showed remorse and came clean during your hospital stay. But you never indicated you were sorry. Instead, you treated me horribly. Remember how we drew up our divorce papers shortly after we got married? I never thought we'd use them, but I filed them today, so we're no longer married. Goodbye." Having said everything I needed to say, I left the dark and quiet hospital feeling a sense of liberation from the resentment that had been bottled up inside me. However, my mother was deeply shocked when she learned the truth. She not only grappled with my sister's infidelity, but also with the responsibility of caring for her physically disabled daughter alone. I ended all ties with John and Mary, but I couldn't abandon my mother to handle everything on her own. I reached out to the woman responsible for the accident, apologized, and arranged compensation for my sister, who was innocently involved. This eased my mother's burden. 2 years have passed since then. I am divorced from John and living independently. My close relationship with him had made our divorce surprising news for my colleagues. Subsequently, I noticed more men approaching me, perhaps because divorced women seemed appealing to them at that time. Despite this, thoughts of my ex-husband lingered, making it hard for me to consider dating again. Instead, I focused on advancing my career by studying for a certification exam and enrolling in an online business school after work. When I was married, I had never imagined pursuing such goals. Unlike my sister, who was dedicated to her career, I had never envied that path. Yet here I was naturally drawn to it. Life, I reflected, is unpredictable. Since then, my ex-husband moved back to his parents' house where he's facing criticism from his relatives for his behavior towards me. His mental state has deteriorated, and there have been reports of violent outbursts causing trouble for those around him. Meanwhile, my sister also returned home but struggled with mental illness, displaying self-centered behavior. My mother, exhausted from everything, used my sister's savings and accident compensation to place her in a care facility. She consulted me beforehand, and I supported her decision. If I hadn't taken action back then, I might have been trapped in a life of servitude to both of them forever. It's something I never foresaw. I passed my certification exam as planned and was transferred to a department where my skills are put to good use. I developed a close relationship with a teacher from my online business school, and soon will be married. He's not just kind to everyone but incredibly caring towards me. When I come home late, he prepares dinner for us, a gesture that brings me immense happiness. As I shared these thoughts with the stars, I hurried home to the partner who awaited me. When a wife buys something, her husband thinks it belongs to him too. If he can't accept that, he suggests divorce. My husband Charles often tries to take things from me for no good reason. Once, he even wanted to give gifts I bought for my parents to his own family to make himself look good. When I confronted him about this, he looked shocked. Before I married Charles, my grandparents left me a valuable gift, a piece of property. They advised me to keep it a secret from Charles, even though he's my husband. They said I should keep quiet about having a source of income and enough money to live comfortably. I felt a bit sorry for Charles, but I chose to follow my grandparents' advice. After my grandfather, who had always taken care of me, passed away, I carried on with my life with Charles. Then, something happened. One day, when I checked the account where I saved money for our living expenses, I saw that $10,000 had been taken out. This account was mostly handled by me and meant to cover the cost of living that Charles and I shared. It was a significant amount, and I couldn't recall withdrawing it myself. It seemed inevitable that Charles was the one who had taken it out. That evening, when Charles returned home, I confronted him about it. "Hey, $10,000 are gone from our living expenses account. Do you know what happened to the money?" "Yeah, I lent it to my mom. She was in some trouble," he replied casually, confirming that Charles had indeed lent the money to my mother-in-law, Lisa. "And you didn't think to inform me beforehand?" "It's all right, though. It's money I earned, so it's not a big deal. We have savings, so losing that amount won't hurt us. If Lisa needed help, I understand why you did it, but it would have been nice to hear about it from you first. After all, the account is for both of us. If it had been his own personal account from when he was single, it would have been acceptable, but withdrawing a large sum from our joint account without discussing it was a bit too much." When I sighed heavily at Charles's selfishness, he frowned and gave me an irritated look. Fine. I'll tell you next time." Charles dismissed me, clearly annoyed, and quickly walked away to the bathroom. I felt uneasy about the situation. He hadn't acted like this when we first got married. He used to listen to me sincerely. Is this how relationships change over time? A few days later, I had no choice but to visit my in-laws' house to deliver a package that had been mistakenly delivered to our address. "Oh, Megan, thanks for making the trip all the way here. Why don't you come inside since you've come all this way?" I had planned to just drop off the package at the door, but I couldn't refuse my parents-in-law's invitation, so I ended up in their living room, having tea. While there, I couldn't help but notice various luxurious items: expensive cosmetics, glamorous clothes, health products. Oh my, our wonderful son gave these to me as gifts. Since there was $10,000 in the bank account anyway, it seemed natural to spend it this way. However, knowing that Lisa needed money and Charles had lent her that exact amount, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that all of it had been spent on her luxury items. As I quietly sipped my tea, not able to muster a smile, my in-laws' cheerful expressions faded, replaced by a look of concern that seemed almost threatening. "Our son is so kind and thoughtful, showering me with gifts. But what about you? Are you being a good wife to him? There's something suspicious going on." "We've heard things, my father-in-law said, his tone implying accusation. "He's always blamed by you for spending money on me," my mother-in-law chimed in. Now it all makes sense. They looked at me with apprehension, as if Charles had painted himself as a victim for doing something generous. I started feeling increasingly weary of both my in-laws and my husband. I never expected to be treated so poorly and overlooked like this. Finally, the idea of divorce began to take shape in my mind. I thought that if I left him, I could go back to my parents' home and use the savings from my passive income to help rebuild their lives. My parents' home is a 2-story house that was built over 30 years ago, before my brother was born. It used to accommodate our family of 5, but after my brother and I moved out, it became too large and difficult for my parents, who have trouble with their legs despite some modifications like ramps and handrails. A smaller single-story house would be much more suitable and comfortable for them. I immediately called my parents to discuss my plan to divorce Charles and rebuild their home. Surprisingly, they weren't shocked by the divorce news and were thrilled about the idea of renovating their house. Over the phone, they eagerly listened to my plans. "I'm so grateful that you're thinking of renovating it for us. Thank you. Even if we won't live there long, it's okay because you can inherit the house as it was built using your own earnings." "All right then, I'll start preparing and planning it step by step. Don't worry, take it easy." My dad and mom's reassuring words lifted my spirits. So I began the process of renovating my parents' house, waiting to hear back from the construction company when suddenly Charles confronted me. "How could you use our savings to build a house without consulting me?" Sitting across from each other at the living room table, Charles slammed his fist down and yelled at me, completely disregarding my feelings. "Well, my parents will be living in the new house." "No, that's not possible because it was built specifically for my parents. You used our joint funds to build it, so my parents have a right to live there. Are you expecting 4 people to squeeze into that small 1-story house?" "Shut up. Just hand over the house to me," Charles yelled, banging the table loudly. I knew if I didn't mention my passive income, things would escalate even further. So I made up my mind to come clean. Actually, I have passive income. I've actually been saving from the real estate my grandparents left me as a gift. I've used that passive income to pay for the house, so none of our shared money was used. As I admitted this, feeling guilty for breaking my promise to my grandparents, Charles in front of me shook his shoulders and began banging the table even harder. "What kind of wife hides her income? You're playing with my money and hiding yours like this." As his anger flared and his face turned red, I realized why my grandparents had advised me to keep my passive income secret. Perhaps they already knew what kind of person Charles was. "I'll take the house as part of the divorce settlement. And remember, the house you built as my wife is also mine. I'm the head of this family, and if you defy me, I'll divorce you." I felt nothing but despair at Charles's demands and was thoroughly fed up with him. How could I have lived with someone like him without knowing who he truly was? I had planned to use my passive income when we might no longer rely solely on Charles's earnings. It was meant as a safety net in case I couldn't work due to injury or illness. I had intended to save it to sustain our life together and share it with Charles when the time was right. But now, I have no intention of spending that money on him anymore. Feel free to take it. I stood up, leaving the table and the house. I couldn't bear to be near Charles any longer. I decided to spend the night at a business hotel to calm down, intending to return home the next day. However, when I returned the next morning, Charles greeted me with a smug smile. He approached me, holding a sheet of paper he had concealed behind his back. It was divorce papers already filled out. You lied about having passive income, didn't you? You pretended to have it to cover up the fact that you were actually taking money from our joint property, didn't you? Charles' accusation bewildered me. I had told him the truth sincerely. I hadn't lied. It's true, I have passive income. Here you go again. I know you can't live without me, Charles sneered as he forcefully placed the divorce papers into my hand. Let me know when I can move in, okay? I'm off for a drink. With that, he patted my shoulder and left, humming in a cheerful mood. In that moment, I finally saw Charles for who he truly was. He hadn't changed. He had always looked down on me since the beginning of our marriage. He never truly considered my feelings. I wasted no time. I packed my things, completed the divorce papers right then and there, and left. I decided to stay with my parents temporarily and explain everything to them. We agreed that I would live with them until the new house was ready. The next day, I was dismayed to find my phone filled with missed calls from Charles. Shortly after, it rang again. Reluctantly, I answered, hoping this would be the last conversation I ever had with him. Hello. Hey. All your stuff is gone, you know. My husband's impatient tone left me with nothing but questions. He was the one who initiated the divorce, so why was he acting so flustered now that I had actually left? Huh? We're getting divorced, so it's normal for my things to be gone. I won't be coming back, so feel free to use the empty space however you like. I wondered if he sensed something different in my tone. There was silence from my husband for a few moments. Finally, it seemed he had realized that I indeed had passive income. Then, after another pause, he spoke in a surprisingly gentle voice I had never heard before. Hey, could you let my parents live in the new house? I don't mind staying with your parents, please. I already told you it's a small one-story house. Please understand. I plan to surprise my parents with it. His request left me speechless. What was he thinking? Wanting to give away a house he didn't even buy and call it a surprise? It seemed reckless beyond belief. You don't care about our savings at all, do you? I've been stressing over the money I give you as an allowance and what we save for living expenses, trying hard to manage everything. That's beside the point here. You're careless with money and leave all the hassle to others, then act like you did everything yourself when it comes to your parents, right? As I had meticulously prepared everything for my parents, my husband suddenly fell silent, fueling my frustration even more. It's shallow of you to act like you orchestrated it all and give the house to your parents. Ultimately, you've been trying to exploit my good intentions and take control of what's rightfully mine. There's no justification for you to trample on my feelings and intentions like this. I won't hand over the house I built with all my heart and soul for my parents just so you can show off to yours. I firmly rejected Charles's proposal, and he began to loudly rant in response. But husbands and wives are supposed to help each other. We're not married anymore, are we? I've already filed for divorce. On the same day my husband, now my ex-husband, handed me the divorce papers, I submitted them to the city office. He had wanted the divorce so eagerly, and I felt it was best to move on quickly. I was already in the process of reverting all the paperwork to what it was before we were married. My ex-husband said in disbelief, Yeah, you've already filed. Why act surprised when you're the one who wanted the divorce? Oh, I didn't expect you to actually leave. Let's start over. Let's talk and try to make things work this time. How could he suggest such a thing now? This is a man who used our savings for his own mother, threatened divorce, and mocked me until the very end. I had no desire to reconcile with someone like him. No, thank you. Please give my regards to your parents, I said cheerfully before hanging up on Charles. The next day, I continued to receive voicemails and messages from him, insisting we could start over and professing his love. But I sensed his motives were only about my property and wealth. To sever all ties, I promptly blocked him and his family from contacting me. Meanwhile, the new house was completed, and my parents and I moved in, enjoying our newfound comfort. Later, I met a mutual friend who knew Charles as well. I explained that we had divorced. My friend expressed sympathy and shared what had been happening with Charles and his family. Firstly, my ex-husband abruptly submitted his resignation letter at work, claiming he no longer needed to work hard because he had acquired real estate. He then disappeared, making himself unreachable to his colleagues. However, the next day, he apparently tried to retract his resignation. His bosses understandably reprimanded him for vanishing without notice and the disruption caused by his sudden resignation letter. The company questioned him about his behavior, but Charles couldn't admit he was relying on my income, so he attempted to fabricate an explanation. Eventually, though, the truth about our divorce came to light and his lies were exposed. As a result, the company refused to reconsider his employment. Charles, who mocked my passive income as probably fake, was actually trying to benefit from my earnings and impressed his parents by giving them a house as a gift. He didn't consider me or our future at all. When I think about that, I no longer have any feelings for my ex-husband. In fact, I feel relieved. I heard that he returned to his parents' home, where they must have been tough on him because he's now scrambling to find a new job. However, his departure from his last job has made it difficult for him to secure employment. It's safe to say he's facing the consequences of his actions. As for me, I live happily with my parents in a home I built myself. I have a job that I love, and I'm enjoying life. I had been saving my passive income for Charles and our future, but now I'll use it to support those who have supported me. My mother-in-law took my passport and burned it. It went up in flames quickly and turned to ashes. Now I can't go on my vacation to St. Bert's Island. I was shocked and asked, "What's going on?" She smirked and said, "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying home," while my husband grinned too. I was horrified by their cruel trick. I knew they might do something like this, but I didn't expect them to be so sneaky. They looked pleased with themselves and even laughed in a nasty way. Then I told them who I really am. My name is Tyra, I'm 29, and I study linguistics at university. Since graduating, I've been learning about different languages and cultures and sharing what I know. My organization sends me on trips abroad, and when that happens, I'm gone for a few months. When I first started this job, I thought marriage wasn't something I'd ever do. But when I went back to my home country at 26, I met Corey, who eventually became my husband. Because of my job, I only see him for a few months at a time before I had to travel again. We stayed in touch with phone calls and emails while I was away. 2 years later, at 28, we got married. Even after our wedding, I continued to spend half the year working abroad, so we were apart a lot. I'm thankful he chose to marry me despite this. Today, I'm heading home from the airport. It's the first time I'll see my husband in 5 months. I should be tired, but I'm excited and walking quickly. When I got home, Corey wasn't there yet, so I started tidying up. I always tell him to keep the place clean, but it's a bit messy. Normally, this would upset me, but today I'm willing to overlook it because I'm just happy to see him. While I'm cooking, I hear the front door open. Corey walks in, and I rush to greet him. "Corey, welcome home. It's so good to see you." "Oh, hi, Tyra. You're back. Is that all you can say? We haven't seen each other in 5 months." "Well, we've been living like this for a while, so I'm used to it." "What? Can't you at least say you missed me?" "Oh, what? I'm tired. Anyway, is dinner ready?" "Yeah, I just finished cooking. Let's eat." Eating with my husband after so many months feels like the best meal ever. Normally, I'd be happy with just this, but today feels a bit different. "Hey, Corey, why do you keep staring at your phone?" "What? What's the problem?" "Nothing's wrong, but I'm finally home." "You've been glued to your phone and haven't really talked to me. We've been in touch through calls and emails all this time, haven't we?" "There's nothing new to talk about now." "That might be true, but it's been a long time since we've seen each other like this. So why?" My frustration with my husband's attitude makes my voice rise. It looks like my comment upset him. He stood up, put his phone on the table, and glared at me. "You know what? You were just on a plane, but I'm exhausted from work." "Got it?" "Hold on. I also jumped on a plane right after work. Didn't you talk to me like that?" "I didn't ask you to do that. You just rushed home on your own." "What? You don't have to say it like that. I missed you. I'm just saying I didn't ask you to come home. If you're going to be like this, don't come back at all. You're being annoying, Tyra." He slammed the table and stormed out of the living room, leaving his dinner untouched. What's wrong with him? Why is he being so cold? I haven't seen him in a long time. Was I the only one excited to see him? What's the point of coming home early if it's like this? Tears fell from my eyes and onto the table. Our reunion was even more disappointing than I had feared. The next day, his attitude didn't improve. When I greeted him with a good morning, he looked at me coldly. "I envy you," he said. "You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working." "That's not true," I replied. "I have a lot of work to do, like summarizing our activities and preparing for the next training session. It's a lot of work, more than you think. Either way, it's something you can do at home. I wish I had a job where I could spend half the year like that." "You don't have to talk like that." "Well, I'm just a company guy, so I have to go to work. You enjoy your time at home, princess." "What the heck, Corey?" Ignoring me, my husband left the house. We had a few arguments before we got married, but he had never been this sarcastic. I was really confused by his behavior and wondered if his words were causing problems between us. I thought about what I might do to improve the situation. While I was going through work materials, I decided to tidy up the house. As I was vacuuming and changing the bed linens, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Feeling uneasy, I answered the call. "Hello, Tyra here." "Hi, Tyra. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and that you arrived yesterday." "Yes, that's right. And I also heard you upset Corey." He was quite angry. "I'm sorry, but it's nothing that should concern you. Well, since you're back, how about we plan a family trip?" "What?" I was taken aback by her suggestion. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law continued. "I was just talking with my husband about going to St. Bert's Island, and Corey mentioned he wanted to join us." "What? That's... So Tyra, you're used to traveling abroad, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements?" "Me? Or are you having trouble understanding what your mother-in-law is asking you to do?" Her voice grew colder. It was clear she didn't really want to travel with me. She just thought it would be easier for her since I'm experienced with travel. I knew my mother-in-law didn't have a high opinion of me. She'd been sarcastic ever since we first met at the wedding reception. Even after 2 years of marriage, things hadn't changed. I often received messages from her while I was working abroad. "How can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you don't take care of the house, I'd rather my son marry someone else. It was a mistake to let him marry you." That's the kind of text I used to get from her. So I had a bad feeling about this call. I never imagined I'd be used for planning a family vacation. But maybe it's better than the usual verbal abuse. I was frustrated with myself for not being able to say no, even though I knew I was being used. A few hours later, my husband came home from work in a much better mood than earlier. He tossed his briefcase on the sofa and, smiling widely, called out to me. "Mom called, didn't she? We can go on a trip to St. Bert's." "Yeah, I heard. But you know what?" "What? You're not thinking of turning it down, are you?" "Mom wants you to come with us, I understand, but why don't you just go with your mom and dad like you originally planned?" As soon as I said that, my husband's demeanor changed. He clicked his tongue and his tone became more threatening. "You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling." "You don't have to speak like that." "It's true, isn't it? Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings, and everything should be in my name, as you probably know." "What, Corey? You're going to pay for the whole trip?" "What are you talking about? We'll split the cost 50-50ths. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents." "What is that supposed to mean? If you've got time to lounge around at home, make the reservations now." "This isn't right. I don't want to." "What are you mumbling about?" My husband grabbed a beer from the fridge and drank it in one gulp. I had a lot on my mind, but I wasn't sure what might happen if I resisted. I felt embarrassed, but I had no choice but to do what my husband and mother-in-law wanted. I made all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to St. Bert's, just as my husband had ordered. On the day of the trip, I was set to pick them up at my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport. A few days before the trip, I couldn't sleep. In the middle of the night, I noticed my husband, who was supposed to be next to me, wasn't there. I went to the living room and heard him talking on the phone with someone. "Oh, it's okay. It's all okay, Mom. I'll be there first thing in the morning as planned." "Mom, please handle the passport issue anyway. Seriously, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you when I get back." I was puzzled by some of what he said. Passport, introducing her. Since he called her Mom, I was pretty sure he was talking to my mother-in-law. It seemed like there was something going on between them that I didn't know about. In the first place, it didn't sit right with me that he wanted me to go on this trip. What could they be planning if I went to my in-laws' house? I didn't have all the details, but I decided to stay extremely cautious until the day of the trip. The day of our trip to St. Bert's finally arrived. I packed my carry-on and handbag, which included my husband's things as well. With everything ready, my husband and I headed to my in-laws' house. I braced myself for whatever was coming, knowing I had to deal with it. When we arrived at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law was the only one to greet us. "Oh, hi Tyra. It's been a while. Good to see you. We're almost ready. I'm going to grab a few things for the trip, so it might be a little while." "Okay, take your time. Oh, and Tyra, could you bring the carry-on case from the other room? It's heavy, so please get Corey to help you." "Sure, I'll do that." I noticed when my husband and mother-in-law exchanged knowing looks. I kept my passport in my pocket, just in case. Following my husband's instructions, I carried the carry-on case back into the living room. There was my mother-in-law, smiling with a hint of mischief. She was holding my passport and grinning. "Now you can't go on the trip to St. Bert's," she said. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to burn this passport right now." "What did you just say?" "I was just using you to handle the trip arrangements." "What are you doing?" "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying behind." "Too bad." She went to the kitchen, lit the passport with a lighter, and watched it burn. The passport started to turn to black ashes in the sink. Once it was completely destroyed, she said, "We did it." My husband cheered. "Yeah, Mom, we made it." "No," I said. "It's just the three of us on this trip. We'll get to meet Corey's new girlfriend when we get back, right?" "Yeah, I've already set that up," my mother-in-law replied. "We don't need this useless woman anymore," my father-in-law said. "You know when something isn't working." He pulled out his cell phone and showed me pictures of himself with another woman, looking pleased with himself. "I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but you'll be staying here while we go on our trip. When we get back, I'll move in with her, and you can leave." My mother-in-law laughed mockingly at his words. Their expressions were full of malice. At that moment, I knew I didn't belong in a family like this anymore. I forced a smile and said, "By the way, whose passport is that?" "What are you talking about?" "It's yours, of course. I took it out of your handbag, so it's your passport." "My passport is right here," I said, holding it up. "What? Why? It can't be." I pulled my passport from my pocket and showed it to her. My mother-in-law's face went pale as she stared at me in panic. "That's not possible," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, it's my passport. See for yourself." It seemed that my mother-in-law had snuck into my handbag and mistakenly thought she'd have found my passport. How could she have burned it without checking properly, especially with her malicious plans? "Whose passport did I burn then?" she asked, her voice quivering. "I guess it was your son's passport that was in there." "So you burned my son's passport?" she asked, horrified. My mother-in-law turned white and began to tremble. My husband, furious, started blaming her. "Mom, what have you done? I told you to be careful. I only found one passport in her handbag. Who would have thought it belonged to me? I don't care. You didn't check properly, and now look what happened. You're saying it's my fault? If you had checked from the start, I wouldn't have made this mistake. What the hell?" Before long, they were blaming each other. I was furious and disgusted by their behavior. "Hey, Tyra, do something," my husband yelled at me, but I was not about to back down. "Seriously, who do you think you are? Telling you what to do. You cheated on me behind my back. How dare you? Both you and your mother are despicable." "Hey, who do you think you're talking to?" "I'm talking to you and your awful mother. Don't think I'm just going to let this slide. You're going to pay me back for the affair and all the nasty things your mother has said to me. Be ready." Just then, my father-in-law came downstairs. "What's going on? What are you doing?" When I told my father-in-law everything, he was furious. The trip was canceled, my mother-in-law got a divorce, and my husband was disowned by his father and banned from coming home. I consulted a lawyer, and we finalized the divorce. I also demanded alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. They had to pay the alimony in one lump sum and cover the cost of canceling the trip to St. Bert's. Since they didn't save any money, they had to borrow to cover the alimony. In the end, they managed to repay everything by borrowing funds. Now my ex-husband lives with his mother and it looks like they are struggling financially. He was also dumped by the woman he had an affair with. As for me, I used the alimony money to move into a condo and enjoy living alone. After all the cheating and mistreatment, I went through many difficulties, but now I'm free and loving life. I plan to continue traveling, learning about different cultures, and sharing my experiences with the world. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video. Kate, what are you doing up so late? Where are you? I'm on a spa vacation with Luna. Oh, I understand now. I discovered everything when my husband lied to me. I'm Kate, a 30-year-old office worker. I've been married to my husband Daniel for 6 years and we have a 6-year-old daughter named Luna. Since we got married when I was pregnant, Luna is growing up to be a wonderful child. Mom, I can help you. Really? Can you roll the hamburger patties like this? Yes, I can do that. There you go. Oh Luna, you're really good at this. Here's one for Dad and one for Mom. This one is for Daddy. He's had a tough day at work, so he gets the big one. He might be so happy he'll cry. While I was having fun cooking with my daughter, my husband came out of the bath. Luna ran to him and said, "I made your hamburger, Daddy." He was happy too and said, "Really? I can't wait to eat it." We were enjoying our time as a happy family, or so I thought. Both my husband and I work, but he has a shorter commute and less overtime than I do. Because of this, I often ask him to pick up our daughter from kindergarten. Recently, he's been coming home late due to work, so I've had to pick her up and bring her home myself. My daughter said sadly on the way home from kindergarten, "I wonder if Daddy doesn't like me anymore." I think she misses him because he used to pick her up, and now he comes home very late. Sometimes he doesn't even get to see her. I gently patted her head, even though it hurt me to see her upset. "Daddy is working really hard for you right now. Once things calm down, he'll be able to spend more time with you." "Really?" "Yes, so let's support him together with Mommy." "Okay, I'll cook for him." She's such a sweet girl. I'm looking forward to the day when we can all eat together as a family again. But a few months later, my husband was still working long hours. He came home very late. Before, he used to be home by the last train, but now he's coming home at 2-3 a.m. or even taking the first train in the morning. Are you sure it's all work? If you're just out drinking, I wish you'd come home and spend time with Luna. I couldn't take it anymore and told my husband how I felt. My daughter has been missing her dad for a month and looks really sad. My husband didn't like what I said and got upset. Huh? What's with the tone? I go to work parties for the family's sake. It's unfair to accuse me like that. Okay, I'm sorry, but you need to understand that Luna is feeling lonely because she doesn't get to spend time with you. After I said this, he went quiet and went straight to the bedroom. Since then, things have been awkward between us. Then, I was told by my company that I needed to go on a short business trip. There were a lot of things I needed to check in person, so I might have to stay 1 or even 2 nights. My first concern was what to do with my daughter. My parents lived too far away to help. I would have to ask my husband, but with how busy he's been, I wasn't sure if I could rely on him. Still, I had no other choice, so I waited for him to come home. I wondered if he had been out drinking again, and sure enough, he came home late. It was well past midnight, and around 3 o'clock, I heard the door unlock. "Welcome home." "Kate, I didn't know you were still up." My husband was surprised to find me waiting for him. I had stayed up because I needed to talk. Huh? Talk? He came home drunk, his face red, but now he looked pale as he sat down at the dining table and stared at me. "So, what do you want to talk about?" "It's not a big deal." But he seemed unusually upset. I told him about my upcoming business trip. It was short notice, but I had to leave in 2 weeks on Friday. I'd need to stay at least 1 night, and possibly 2 if there was a lot to do. I couldn't help but notice how strange he was acting. "Can you take care of Luna while I'm away? I know you're busy with work," I asked, feeling apologetic. My husband looked relieved. "Oh, that's totally fine." "Really?" "Yeah. Are you okay with work?" "Of course I'm busy, but I need to put you and Luna first." "How about I take a day off and take Luna on an overnight hot spring trip? I haven't had a chance to spend time with her lately. I'm sure Luna would love that." I was relieved to hear my husband say that. It showed he really cared about our family. I had been worried lately about whether he truly cared, but it seemed my concerns were unfounded. The next day, while taking my daughter to kindergarten, I told her the news. "What? Daddy and I can go on the hot spring trip together." She was so excited and happy, which made me happy too. When the day of my business trip arrived, it went better than I expected. It was my first trip since having Luna, but everything went smoothly. The people I met were very helpful and made sure everything was in order for me to check. The work went so smoothly that I finished by 7 p.m. that day. I thought, since I'm done, I might as well go home tonight. I wasn't sure if I'd be staying one night or two without knowing the status of my work. I planned to spend the first night at a manga cafe instead of a hotel to avoid cancellation fees. If I got a ticket, I could catch the last train home. I wanted to spend a relaxing evening at home if I could, so I hurried to the train and headed home. I imagined my husband and daughter enjoying a delicious meal at a hotel. The thought of my daughter's happy face made me feel better. I decided that I'd wake up early the next morning, clean the house thoroughly, and surprise them both. With that in mind, I arrived home around 11 p.m. I wondered why the light was on in the living room. Did my husband forget to turn it off? Frowning, I walked inside and found my daughter curled up on the sofa, crying. "Oh, Luna, what's wrong?" "Mommy, why are you crying? Where's Daddy?" My husband was nowhere to be seen. I was so upset I immediately started asking Luna questions. "Daddy left this morning without me." "What? What is going on? What was my husband thinking?" I was furious with my husband's crazy behavior, but I needed to calm Luna down first. I hugged her tightly. "I'm so sorry. I know you were lonely being alone so late at night." As I held her and stroked her head, she seemed to relax and started to fall asleep in my arms, exhausted from being scared and anxious. I gently carried her to bed, then went back to the living room to call my husband. "Kate, why are you calling at this hour? Where are you?" "I'm on a spa trip with Luna." "Why are you whispering?" "Luna is already tired and asleep. I don't want to wake her." "Oh, I see. I'm sure she's asleep, but she's not with me." I realized my husband had lied to me. I was close to losing my temper, but I managed to stay calm. "How's the trip going?" "It's great. I wouldn't mind staying another night. The food is good, and the hot springs are wonderful." "Well, why don't we stay one more night then?" I said that, and my husband sounded unsure. "But Kate, you're coming home after one night, right? If you do, you'll be alone, so Luna and I will come back tomorrow." I knew exactly what he was worried about. He was afraid that if I got home first, I'd discover he had left our daughter alone. So I decided to lie. "Well, I've got a lot of work to do and will be home later than planned. I'll need to stay another night, so don't worry about me. Enjoy your trip as long as you like." He didn't question my lie at all. "Really? Then I'll extend the trip for one more night." Luna is really excited. I need to give her more time with her daddy since I haven't been able to spend much time with her recently. "Okay, just make sure to call me when you know when you'll be back." My daughter's excited. "What are you talking about?" She was curled up and crying by herself. I held back my anger and ended the call. I was determined to make him face the consequences for the pain he caused Luna. I called my parents and explained everything. Then I quickly started packing my things and contacted a moving company. Luckily, I found a company that could come that day, so I arranged for them to move my stuff out. My daughter looked confused as she saw several men coming in and taking things out of the house. "I need to talk to her." "Luna, I've decided that we're not going to live with your dad anymore. I don't want you to be sad anymore. I'm going to quit my job and move in with Grandma and Grandpa so I can spend more time with you. But if we move to Grandma and Grandpa's house, you won't be able to see your dad. What do you want to do?" I knew it was tough to ask such a question to a 6-year-old, but I wanted to know her thoughts. "Will I never see Daddy again?" "If you really want to see him, I can arrange for you to visit him occasionally, but he won't be living with us anymore." I wanted my daughter to have the chance to see her father if she wanted, even though I doubted he would make time for her after the divorce, especially after leaving her alone at home while he went on vacation. As I was thinking about this, my daughter seemed to come to a decision. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I'm going with you, Mommy. Daddy probably doesn't care about me." I cried and asked him, "Why are you leaving me?" But he didn't answer and just left. I was deeply hurt that he made our 6-year-old daughter feel this way just so he could go on a vacation with his mistress. I felt he was a terrible man, a lousy father, and worthless. I regretted leaving my daughter with him and going on a business trip if it meant this would happen. Luna, I'm so sorry for making you so sad. I hugged Luna tightly, and we started working on the move. I decided to leave the rest of the issues with my husband behind and focus on settling in with my parents. A few hours later, my husband called. Hey, why is all your stuff missing? And Luna's things too. What's going on? Don't you know why? Of course not. Luna's crying because her stuff is gone. Do you really think you can keep lying to me after all this? That's strange. Luna is now eating noodles that my mother made. What? We already know you left your 6-year-old daughter alone at home while you went on a trip with someone else. How could you do that? You're not fit to be a father. If I hadn't come back that day, you could have traumatized Luna for life. My husband was stunned and silent, clearly not expecting me to be with Luna already. Anyway, you left your daughter alone just to be with another woman. I can't stay married to you. I want a divorce. Divorce? Oh no, please reconsider. I can't. I don't want to see you anymore. While we were on the phone, I heard the doorbell ringing repeatedly. Oh God, who could it be at a time like this? My husband sounded annoyed, but I knew who it was. Looks like they've arrived. Dad and Mom. I heard my husband's voice on the phone, followed by my father-in-law yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" And then a loud commotion. Well, that's the start. I guessed it was the sound of him getting beaten up. My father-in-law had practiced judo for many years and was now an advisor at a university. He adored his granddaughter, Luna. When I told him about my husband's infidelity and how he left Luna alone, he was furious. He said he was going to teach my husband a lesson. I decided to ask him for a favor. What the hell do you think you're doing with your own daughter? I didn't raise you to be such an... I could hear my stepfather's angry voice repeating his thoughts. Even though we lived in an apartment, I was glad we were on the first floor. If there were people living below, they might have complained. But since we'd already moved out, it didn't concern me anymore. My father-in-law really laid into my husband, both physically and mentally. After that, the divorce settlement went smoothly. I got full custody, and the alimony and child support were paid in one lump sum. I even managed to get alimony from the mistress. My husband tried to remarry the mistress, but she wasn't interested in a serious relationship and left him because he was too serious. At work, he's embarrassed about his affair. He's been disowned by his parents, dumped by his mistress, and now his daughter is with me. He's left with nothing but his own mess, and frankly, he deserves it. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying happy times with my daughter at my parents' house. My parents are farmers, so I help them out. My daughter loves eating fresh vegetables from the farm and enjoys being surrounded by nature. I'm committed to putting her first in my life. Leaving a young daughter alone for an affair? He should have faced legal consequences. I hope Luna isn't too heartbroken, but it feels good that my husband finally lost everything he had. Kate, I hope you and your daughter stay happy and continue to find joy together. Hey Grace, you need to understand what you've done. How can you be so careless as to leave your responsibilities as a wife and cause problems for William? You're a terrible wife. I'm going to teach you a lesson. Well, Mother, I have my reasons for leaving. That doesn't matter. We're moving to a new, nicer apartment. If you want to live with us, I can tell you where it is. I'm sure my mother-in-law doesn't know anything yet. Well, it's good for me that she doesn't know. No, thank you. My name is Grace. I'm 35 and work in an office. I've been married to my husband William for 5 years. He's 40, which is 5 years older than me. I used to date older men, but I liked William because he was generous and kind. Our relationship was good, so we got married. Our marriage was okay, but soon after, problems started to affect our once peaceful life. I lost my job, and then William got fired because the company he worked for was struggling because of the recession. I never expected William to lose his job since he worked for a big company. I thought we would be okay financially and that this would last for our whole lives. But it turns out, nothing in life is guaranteed. We fell into financial trouble. I was a stay-at-home wife, but I decided to start working again. I reached out to my old employer, and fortunately, they hired me because someone had just left to have a baby. It was a relief to have some extra income. If William could find a new job, we'd be okay. But it's tough for a middle-aged man to find work. So he had to take part-time jobs as a day laborer. earning around $700 a month. I wasn't making much either, so we were barely scraping by. "Hey, the rent here is too high. Can we move to a cheaper place? We need to lower our fixed costs to make things easier." We used to have a good income and didn't worry about money, living comfortably in a nice apartment. But now, with our financial situation changed, I thought it would be wise to move to a cheaper place. However, William strongly disagreed. "No, we're not moving." "Why not?" "If we move to a smaller apartment, my mom will ask questions." "So what? Why don't you just tell her the truth? We're struggling because you're not working now." William got upset and raised his voice. "Don't ever tell my mother I'm unemployed. With your salary and what I make, we can cover the rent. Let's just keep it that way." I was both shocked and confused. "You care more about saving face and keeping our current apartment than about our marriage. Even if we can pay the rent, we're still struggling to get by." That's why I suggested moving to a cheaper place. We can't save any money. But William wouldn't budge, so I had to give up on that idea. Life continued to be tough. One day, William said something really frustrating to me. "Hey, this is all we have for dinner tonight. We used to have a lot more food. Just because you're working now doesn't mean you can neglect your responsibilities at home. Don't be lazy about managing this." His comment made me angry, so I snapped back, "We're barely making ends meet. I'm doing my best at home and at work. If you weren't so concerned about keeping up appearances and wanting to stay here, we could save on food expenses. Or maybe you could earn more money so everything would be fine." When I made those comments, William got really angry and said, "What are you talking about? Don't ever say that to me again. Just wait and see. I'll get a job at a good company and earn more money than you." He was furious, but if it made him more determined, I thought I could handle it. I tried to convince myself that it was okay. But despite his determination, William couldn't find a new job. He had to keep working part-time as a day laborer. Even though he was motivated, he wasn't getting any job offers. He hadn't done any extra training or gotten new qualifications. He had just been doing part-time work. William faced rejection at every interview and grew frustrated with having to compete with younger candidates. Eventually, he gave up on job hunting, still believing he could earn more than I did. I was disappointed and had lost hope. It wasn't just William's situation that worried me. Earlier today, I got another phone call from my mother-in-law. Despite being at work, she called me more than 10 times before I could return the call during my lunch break. Her voice was high-pitched and frustrated from the start. "Why didn't you answer the phone right away? I told you I'm at work, didn't I?" "Well, you called while I was working." My mother-in-law is very close to her husband. A year ago, she called me frequently, and I thought she must be lonely and needed support. But all she talked about was her duty to support her husband, and now that I've started working, she was furious and kept calling me while I was at work. "Did you discuss this with William properly? You can't even return my calls." "I'm sorry. It's hard for us to live with you now. I'm not asking for your opinion." William won't object to it. "No, William says it's too hard right now. Plus, we're having financial problems." "Financial problems?" "William works for a big company. He must be making a lot of money. You should be rich, right?" I'm always at a loss when she says things like that. William has been very clear that I shouldn't tell his mother the truth, so I can't explain our real situation. Instead, my mother-in-law thinks I'm selfish for working and doesn't believe how tough things are for us. Her calls are annoying, both when I'm at work and when I'm home at night. She believes that as a wife, my main job is to support my husband, which includes taking care of his mother. "You haven't come to visit me lately. What's going on?" "I have a full-time job and I'm exhausted. William works part-time on weekends, so our schedules don't match. I'm sorry. We're both so busy that it's hard to find time." "Your schedule?" "William is off on weekends. You could come then, right?" My mother-in-law seemed very frustrated and continued to complain. I felt like it was time to finally tell her the truth about William's situation. "No, William works on weekends." "What do you mean?" Just as I was about to tell her the truth, William, who had been lounging on the sofa watching TV, rushed over and grabbed my phone. "Mom, I'm sorry I haven't visited you lately. I'm working on a big project and have to work on weekends too. I'll come see you soon." After he finished speaking, he hung up the phone and came back to me. "What were you doing? Were you trying to tell my mom the truth?" "Just tell her the truth." If you keep hiding it, she'll keep saying things because she doesn't know what's really going on. I'm sorry to hear that, but don't tell my mom. That's enough. Just keep your pride and tell her the truth. Shut up. I'm the one keeping us afloat, so you should be grateful instead of arguing. With that, he went back to his room. I was at my breaking point. I couldn't solve our financial issues, and both my husband and his mother were cornering me. It was too much. William complained that his day job was too demanding and didn't do any housework, but his job wasn't even full-time. He worked on weekends and one day during the week. The rest of the time, he was home. I was sure he could find ways to earn more money or at least help with housework. Why do you do nothing at home and expect me to handle all the chores and work? Fed up with William's complaints, I decided to leave home for a while. I went back to my parents' place for a week to show William how tough managing the house really was. I told my parents everything that had been happening, and they suggested I should get a divorce as soon as possible. But we were in love, had been married for 5 years, and I didn't want to end it just like that. If I was going to get a divorce, I wanted to make sure I tried everything to fix things first. If that didn't work, then I'd consider a divorce. While I was at my parents' house, William called me. "When are you coming home? Where's my mail? I won't be home for a while, so you'll have to handle all the housework while I'm gone." "Don't be ridiculous. Just come home and take care of the chores." "No, I won't. You know how hard housework is. You can clean the house, do the laundry, and cook, do everything yourself. It's important for you to understand how tough it is for me to manage all the housework while working." I made it clear I wasn't coming back, and I ignored William's repeated calls. Staying at my parents' place was very comfortable. For the first time in a long time, I could share the housework with my parents. My mother would say, "You must be tired," and she made many home-cooked meals. I really appreciated not having to do anything and getting food served to me. After spending about a week there, I thought I might want to stay a bit longer. But my parents' house was quite far from my office, taking an hour and a half each way to commute, so it wasn't practical. I thought it was time for William to understand how hard housework is, so I decided to come back home. I was worried the place might be a mess, but it was actually cleaner than I expected. Still, something seemed off. When I checked William's room, I noticed his clothes and suitcases were gone. I figured he must have gone to his mother's place, so I called him. "What are you calling me for now? Where are you?" "I'm at my parents' house." "You didn't go to your parents' house right after I left, did you?" "That's right. What's your point? It doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't have left in the first place. I'm already upset and not going back to that house." "What do you mean?" "I'm going to live with my mom. I'm moving into a new apartment." "I have no idea what you're talking about." I was speechless when the voice on the phone suddenly changed. "Hey, Grace, do you realize what you've done? How can you abandon your duties as a wife and create problems for William? You're a terrible wife. I'm going to teach you a lesson." "Well, Mother, I have my reasons for leaving." "That doesn't matter. We're moving to a new, nicer apartment. If you want to join us, I'll tell you where it is." I'm sure my mother-in-law doesn't know anything yet. Well, it's good for me that she doesn't. No. Thank you." "What?" My immediate refusal shocked my mother-in-law. I was firm in my decision not to move. "Oh, are you serious? If William is going to live with me, then unless you come over here, you'll have to be on your own." "You can live alone, can't you? You've been relying on him." "Don't worry, I have enough to manage on my own. If we don't live together, then there's no reason for us to stay married. So I'm divorcing him." The mention of divorce seemed to shock both my mother-in-law and William. On the phone, my mother-in-law said, "Grace, there's no need to talk about divorce. I can't stay married to you anymore. I need to get rid of a terrible husband like you as soon as possible." When I said that, my mother-in-law reacted angrily. "How dare you speak about William like that? We don't want a life like yours either. So fine, William, just get a divorce." "No. I'll get the divorce papers ready. You'll regret this. It's too late for apologies." "Same to you." With that, the call ended. I figured my mother-in-law and William would soon show up with the divorce papers. I was relieved that things were turning out as I hoped. I was grateful that William wasn't willing to change and had gone back to his mother's place. This made it easier for me to decide to move on. If he wasn't going to improve, there was no reason for us to stay together. I packed my bags and waited for my mother-in-law to arrive. A few hours later, she showed up. "Oh, William isn't here. He doesn't need to be. Here you go. I had him fill out his part already. You need to complete yours as soon as possible." She handed me the divorce papers. I noticed that William's section had a shaky handwriting, as if he was reluctant. My mother-in-law ranted, "William is such a wonderful man. Despite having a terrible wife like you, he was hesitant about the divorce. I'll never forgive you for causing trouble for such a great person. I hope you live poorly and regret it." While I filled out my part of the form, my mother-in-law continued to yell at me. William's pride had prevented him from telling his mother the truth until the end. What a pathetic man he is. "What happened to your house? I saw that." "Well, if you want to come over, there's no place for you." "No, I won't." "How much did you sell it for?" "It was old, so it must have been cheap." "That's none of your business, but since I'm being nice, I'll tell you. It was about $50,000. It's not a huge amount, but enough for retirement. William will cover the cost of our new apartment." "Wow, I'm surprised you got approved." "What are you talking about? William is a high-class person. It was expected." "So you deposited the money into William's account. How did you know that?" "That's not important. Stop asking." And that's just how a divorced woman talks. "So obviously you're still interested in him, but it's too late for that." "Don't worry. I've already agreed to the divorce." When I said that, my mother-in-law snapped and left. I was thrilled to be free from both her and William. I gathered the rest of my belongings and moved them back to my parents' house. I discovered a lot of things I collected for my small apartment. By leaving, I had managed to provoke my mother-in-law, which helped me escape the financial struggle. There was no way I'd hand over any of William's property. She would have to deal with it. Even now, I find it amusing to remember William's pale face during the property division discussion. Then, about 2 years later, I got a call from a number I recognized. I thought it might be work-related and picked up the phone, only to find it was my ex-mother-in-law. "Oh my God, Grace, please help me." "Mother, don't call me that. We're strangers now." "Don't say that. I'm in trouble." "Huh? Can't pay the rent and running out of savings." "Yes." "He didn't tell you about the financial problems until things were really bad, did he?" "Oh, you knew. I suspected he didn't want to tell you, but every time I tried, William told me not to." "I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry, Grace. I didn't know anything. Please come back." "I don't want to." "He wouldn't change no matter how much I tried. Even you were always bullying me. I don't want to be around people like you ever again." "Please don't say that. I don't have anything to eat anymore. I'm really struggling." According to my ex-mother-in-law, William had been trying to keep up appearances and didn't tell her about the financial issues. He used the $50,000 from selling the family home to pay rent, but his mother became suspicious if he didn't spend money on expensive groceries and fancy meals now and then. As a result, he quickly burned through that money and is now broke. Well, he got what he deserved, didn't he? Why don't you put aside your pride and live modestly in a cheap apartment? No, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to live comfortably with my elite son. My ex-mother-in-law cried as she spoke, but I quietly ended the call and blocked all her numbers. I also filed a restraining order against her just in case I needed to involve the police. They always seem to rely on others, whether it's parents or children. I've learned a lot from this experience and am determined to live independently. I've refocused on my own life and am working to move forward. The truth is clear. William continued living beyond his means, and my mother-in-law blamed only me without questioning her own son. I'm relieved to have cut ties with such a difficult mother and son. I'm confident that I can now live an independent life and hopefully meet a wonderful person in the future. I wish for happiness and success moving forward. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next one. My name is Gracie. I'm 27 years old and I work both at home and in an office. My husband, Aaron, is the same age as me. He loves his mother a lot, but his mom, Eliza, tends to be quite mean to me. Even though our marriage has had its problems, we just celebrated our 2nd anniversary and I'm proud of how I've managed to handle everything. Work has become my way of relaxing. Because of this, I've been getting promoted frequently, which is rare for women. Right now, I'm on a business trip traveling around Europe for meetings. I'm currently in an important meeting. During the meeting, my phone, which was on silent, started vibrating. I thought it might be an emergency because I had 2 missed calls. When I checked my phone, I saw that the calls were from my mother-in-law, Eliza. What's going on? I thought, worried that something might be wrong. I quickly decided to call back. Just as I was about to leave my desk, Eliza called again. "Hello, Gracie. Where are you?" she asked, sounding annoyed. I picked up the call and wasn't happy with the tone of her voice. "Maybe I shouldn't have answered this," I muttered. "Hi, Eliza. How are you? Is there something urgent?" "Why aren't you answering me? I asked where you are," she said, sounding impatient. Even though her attitude annoyed me, I was in the middle of an important meeting and didn't want to argue. So I said softly, "Sorry, didn't Aaron tell you? I'm in a meeting on a business trip. Can I call you back when I'm done?" Of course, Aaron told me. "What are you doing, leaving your house and husband alone? Come back home right now," Eliza demanded, with her usual sudden and unreasonable request. "I'm sorry, Eliza, but I'm in an important meeting and I can't just..." I started to explain, but she cut me off. "You're so bossy, even though you're just Aaron's wife. I don't care about your excuses. Just come home right now. Today is very important. Do you understand?" "What? Today is important?" I asked, surprised. Eliza finally admitted, "We're celebrating my 60th birthday today." She said this in a smug tone. I remembered her birthday was supposed to be at the end of the month. I was surprised to hear it was today, especially since I was on a business trip. My husband and I had already planned a special dinner for her birthday at a nice restaurant. I was fed up with Eliza trying to boss me around again. It seemed like she was getting worse every year, especially when she knew I was busy with important work. I told her, "As I've mentioned, I'm on a business trip, so I can't come home." "Oh, that's funny," she said. "I called Aaron earlier, and he said he'd take a day off for me. All the relatives will be there. But you, Gracie, always working. You're so cold. How do you feel about your husband's family?" I knew if I listened to her much longer, her sarcasm would just continue. Since I was still in a meeting, I couldn't stay on the phone with her, so I said, "I'm sorry, but no matter what you say, I can't make it to your 60th birthday celebration." Eliza's tone changed abruptly. She took a deep breath and said, "Fine then, I won't consider you family. Don't come back home. It's a divorce. Aaron deserves better." Her harsh words hit me hard. I was both angry and upset, but I didn't want to argue with her on the phone. I said, "All right, I'll talk to you when I get home. I'm sorry, but I have to go." Eliza snapped, "What's with that attitude? I told you not to come back. I'll talk to Aaron myself." Then she hung up. I was exhausted from dealing with my mother-in-law. I returned to the meeting with a deep sigh. After 2 days of meetings, I finally made it home. On the way back, I was so angry and frustrated with my mother-in-law that I barely remembered how I got home. When I opened the front door and called out, I heard my husband's tired voice say, "Welcome back." I took off my heels and went straight to the living room, leaving my luggage at the door. There, I saw a stack of cardboard boxes and my husband, Aaron, sweating as he taped them up. "What's with all the boxes?" I asked. Aaron told me the boxes were packed with my things. He explained that Eliza had indeed celebrated her 60th birthday on the day she called me, without me. She told everyone that I had neglected her birthday and was rude on the phone. Eliza even told the relatives she wanted me to be divorced and sent back to my parents' house because I wasn't good enough for her son. This sounded exactly like something my mother-in-law would do, so I asked Aaron, "And then what happened? Did your mother tell you to get a divorce and you agreed to it?" "No, I didn't exactly agree," Aaron said. "But she told me to pack up your stuff and I didn't have much choice. What could I do?" He stopped taping up the boxes and spoke in a tired voice. "What do you mean? You didn't argue with your mother? Does that mean you're okay with the idea of getting a divorce?" Aaron explained that his father, Alex, had also told him, "If Eliza's upset, it'll be tough for you, so you better do what she says." So Aaron went along with the divorce. I couldn't believe he was accepting the divorce so easily. What is wrong with Aaron's family? His father is controlled by his mother, and Aaron blindly obeys her too. It felt like no one was on my side. When I was at a loss for words, Aaron said, "What my mother says is final. It's only until she calms down and things settle. This divorce isn't real." I'll come for you when things are better." He looked at me with pleading eyes. I wish he would show that kind of pleading to his own mother. How could a grown man like Aaron be so afraid of his mom? I thought, there's no saving this. I almost felt ashamed, questioning what I ever saw in him. But then I realized maybe this was an opportunity. Staying with Aaron would only mean more torment from Eliza, always pushing me toward a divorce. Maybe it was actually lucky to get a divorce from him without much hassle. I could support myself just fine. Even if I lived alone, I wouldn't lack for anything. Suddenly, everything seemed clearer. I looked at Aaron and said, "Fine, let's get a divorce." Right after that, I called Eliza. After 3 tries, she finally picked up. "Hello," Eliza answered. I said quietly, "As you wish, we're getting a divorce." Eliza, sounding triumphant, replied in a bouncy tone, "Yes, please, leave. Finally, you realize you're not good enough for Aaron." I'm so relieved. "Don't worry, I'll find him a new wife who's obedient, pretty, and nice to her in-laws." She continued, "I'm sure Aaron will be popular. I'll take care of him until he finds his next wife. So don't worry about that." After she finished with her sarcasm, I told Eliza, "Well, don't misunderstand me, Mother." Eliza, still in a good mood, responded, "Oh, you're just a sore loser. Don't worry about me." "Oh, and Gracie," she added, "I got the divorce papers from the city office and gave them to Aaron. Don't forget to sign them." Then, without another word, she hung up. Aaron, who had been listening to my conversation with Eliza, looked relieved. I thought, is Aaron really that clueless? I asked him, "By the way, does your mother know you're a full-time house husband?" He replied, "How could I tell her that? My mother is obsessed with the idea that I'm a high-ranking employee at a big company." He said this with a firm tone. "Oh right," I said. "Now that I think about it, you've never been honest with Eliza. You always wear a worn-out sweatshirt at home, but you change into a suit whenever you go out to see her. You also pretend not to be home when she calls, making her think you're at work." Eliza had boasted at her 60th birthday party that Aaron was such a devoted son he took time off just to attend her celebration. She also mentioned that with his status, he could easily find a more obedient and attractive wife than me. I'm sure the truth will come out once we're divorced. But Eliza, who believes her son is perfect, would never expect that Aaron had actually quit his job at the major company. Aaron had actually quit his job about a year ago. What Eliza saw as her elite son, a symbol of high status, was now just an unemployed full-time house husband. Aaron lost his job after a major mistake led to a written apology, a demotion, and a pay cut. He probably didn't tell his mother about this. Aaron must have been deeply shocked by his fall from the elite path. Since Eliza had always pampered and spoiled him, he became quite fragile and sensitive. Just the thought of going back to the office to deal with the consequences of his mistake made him feel anxious and sick. He couldn't even leave the house, let alone go to work. Initially, Aaron tried to report his absences and apply for paid leave, but eventually he stopped even calling in. As his unauthorized absences piled up, he got fired. Now, he seems to have no plans to look for another job and is heavily relying on my income. Aaron hasn't told Eliza about this because he knows she would be furious and upset. I was a bit disappointed I wouldn't get to see Eliza's reaction when she discovered Aaron's situation after I left. I imagined she'd be shocked, maybe even have a stroke. But that was no longer my concern. Aaron handed me the divorce papers and said, "This is just a cover to convince my mother, okay?" I quickly submitted the papers and signed a lease for a new apartment, moving in as soon as possible. A month later, I got a call from Eliza, even though I thought I cut ties with her for good. Curious about what she wanted, I answered, "What do you want now? Aren't you happy to be rid of me?" I said with a hint of sarcasm. Eliza replied, "You're still the same. Just listen to me." She continued in her usual tone, talking about Aaron. After I left, Eliza had visited Aaron's apartment several times to help with chores. Each time she found him just lounging around in his room with no sign of him going to work. Since he didn't seem sick, she asked me if I had any idea what was going on. I held back a laugh and replied casually, I see. Well, Aaron's like that because he has no intention of working again." Eliza seemed to have forgotten she was the one who'd kicked me out and asked, "Gracie, can you do something about it?" "Why should I?" "You didn't want me in your family and wanted nothing to do with me," I said. It was so typical of her to ask for something only when it suited her after mistreating me for so long. She then said, "I was wondering if you said something to Aaron before you left." I couldn't believe how she was trying to make me the bad guy. Doesn't she see the problem is with her son, not me? I'm the one who was hurt here, you know. Oh really? Eliza said. You only married Aaron for a luxurious life, right? So why would a divorce be so painful for you? She looked at me as if I'd married Aaron just for his money. Are you kidding me? I was the one supporting Aaron financially during our marriage. I was the one providing for him. In reality, I couldn't afford to live extravagantly because of Aaron. I was fine with the divorce, but should I consider asking for alimony? Eliza couldn't believe what I said. How dare you make up something like that? Gracie, you just forgot to ask for alimony, didn't you? Aaron has a higher income and position than you. Don't be so unreasonable. If you want money, Aaron can pay whatever you want. After all, Aaron is a high-level employee at a major company. Eliza's argument was as outrageous as ever. Maybe Aaron hadn't told her the truth yet. I didn't want to seem like I was just tattling, but I saw an opportunity to get back at her. So I told her, "Your proud son is actually a full-time house husband. He quit his job a long time ago." "What? You're lying," Eliza shouted, unable to accept what I said. Her voice was so loud, I thought it might damage my eardrums. I held the phone away from my ear and said, "Why don't you check with the company? You'll find out who's telling the truth." Eliza went silent for a moment. Then she said, "Well, what if that's true? How are we going to manage? I can't support my son on just my pension, and no one will want to marry him if he's unemployed. What are we going to do?" Her voice had clearly softened, and I couldn't help but grin. "What shall we do?" I asked. Eliza was silent for a moment, then mumbled something with someone beside her. Finally, she said, "Hey Gracie, will you please come back home?" I was puzzled by her sudden change of tone, but replied firmly, "No, we're already divorced. I wouldn't come back to your family if heaven and earth turned upside down." Then I heard commotion in the background. Someone was shouting. It sounded like Aaron. "I told you I'd come for you when things settled down." Aaron's voice rang out. Eliza responded, Yes, you could remarry my son if you wanted." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "No way, I wouldn't do it for the world. Don't joke about this. Thanks, but seriously, no." I made it clear to Eliza that I wasn't interested in getting involved with her son or dealing with any more toxic relationships. I wanted nothing to do with someone who adored his mother too much. "I did what you asked me to do, so please stop changing your mind," I said. Eliza replied, "But there's a bit of verbal sparring here. It's not like you should take my words so seriously. You've been talking back to me with a nonchalant attitude, haven't you? I didn't think you'd actually go through with divorcing my son." It seemed she hadn't expected me to reject her offer so firmly. In response to Eliza's bitter excuses, I said, "Well, I was just putting up with it. Besides, Aaron packed up my things and kicked me out without consulting me." I let out my frustration, listing everything she had done to me. "You see, that was just a prank," she said. "A prank? It's worse than that," I said, feeling completely fed up. There was nothing more to say. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 1 o'clock. My lunch break had been wasted on this pointless conversation. Eliza, are you done now?" I asked. "What, Gracie? What did you say?" She replied, her voice still annoyingly sweet. Did Eliza really think a sweet voice would get her a good answer? Knowing I wouldn't meet her expectations, I said, "I'm going to hang up now. I have another meeting in a few minutes and need to review some documents." As I started to disconnect the call, Eliza kept insisting, Wait, Gracie. Hey, Gracie, say something." I could hear her shouting, and she also scolded Aaron, saying, "You didn't handle this right, and look what happened." It was clear that Eliza blames everyone else for her problems. I was so fed up with her that I ended the call and blocked her number. Afterward, Aaron tried to contact me constantly. Seizing the opportunity, I asked my lawyer to pursue alimony. Aaron's family, probably nervous about legal action, quickly paid the alimony in a lump sum. It seemed my ex-parents-in-law advanced the money. Because of this, Alex and Eliza were constantly irritated with Aaron, telling him daily to find a job and work, which Aaron was fed up with. The former Elites had fallen far from their previous status. Aaron ended up moving back to his parents' house because he couldn't afford his apartment rent. He blamed his parents for his divorce and was now draining their pension and retirement savings. Like mother, like son, they blamed each other for their problems and refused to reflect on their own actions. They were even planning to apply for welfare soon. I hope the government will help them realize that they can't continue their selfish ways. As for me, the proposal I made during my business trip was accepted, leading to a major contract being signed. I was promoted again, received a higher salary, and now enjoy a rich bachelorette life, free from in-laws' torment and financial dependency on a family member. If I ever consider marriage again, I'll definitely do a thorough background check to avoid any mama's boys or crazy in-laws. I'm in charge of the household, and my rules are final. If you don't follow them, we'll get a divorce. Even though my husband was cheating on me, he still tried to boss me around. Why should I do everything he says? If that's how it's going to be, let's just get a divorce. I put all the loans in his name so he would see how much I contributed to our life together. My name is Belle. I'm 36 years old and work as a systems engineer. I've been married to my husband Derek for 6 years. We met through work because my company hired his company for some projects. When I was working for his company as a temp, he was very nice to me. We started hanging out outside of work, dated for a while, and then he proposed. I said yes. When I got married, I left my job at the company. Working as an engineer was very demanding and stressful, and the pay wasn't great. I was worried that if I kept working like that, I wouldn't have enough time for my husband, and our relationship would suffer. So I decided to become a freelancer. This way, I could have more time for household chores and to be with my husband. At first, freelancing didn't make much money, but I had engineering experience. Gradually, I got more clients and my income grew. I was surprised at how quickly things improved and was thankful for my husband's financial support during that time. I worked hard on housework, even though cooking wasn't my strong point. I used recipe books to try different meals to keep my husband happy. "Thanks for cooking and cleaning. It really helps me out," he said. His praise made me feel good. In the beginning, we respected each other and had a happy life. But after a few years, my husband suddenly suggested, "Isn't it time for us to get a new house?" Huh? A new house? I was shocked when my husband brought it up. He's not the type to save money. "Well, shouldn't we save a bit more first?" I asked. "What are you talking about? I earn a good income, don't I?" Yeah, but we haven't had any financial issues since we got married," I said, even though I wanted to mention that it was because of my income too. Although he gave me money for household expenses, he always used up his own allowance before payday. So I saved as much as I could from my own freelancing income and added it to our budget. That's how we managed to live comfortably without any financial problems. I was thankful for his income when we first got married, which is why I didn't tell him that my freelancing income had grown. I didn't want to hurt his feelings by revealing how much I was actually making. Even if I felt like we might have spent too much, our lifestyle hadn't changed. I realized my income had probably increased and wondered if my husband didn't fully understand his own finances. I was surprised by his excitement about building a new house, and I didn't know how to stop him. "What kind of house are you thinking of?" I asked, trying to find a way to build something affordable while considering his preferences. But he kept adding more and more features. "If we want to include all of these, the house will be very expensive," I said. "It's not a big deal. It's a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, and my income should cover it, right?" he replied. I was puzzled about how he came to that conclusion. I regretted not telling him about my increased income and decided it was time to do so to help him understand. "Derek, about the household expenses, I actually contribute a significant amount from my income too," I said. For some reason, he didn't believe me. "Come on, don't be so slow about this." "I'm not lying," I insisted. I wanted us to buy a more affordable house, but my husband didn't listen. He used his salary to take out a loan for a house that was stretching our budget. At first, I thought we were managing our money well, but over time, his spending got out of control. He started buying expensive clothes and watches and went out drinking every night with his colleagues. Even though he worked extra hours to cover these costs, his spending was hard to ignore. Despite all this, he was determined to build a house, and eventually he managed to do it. "Wow, this is a really nice house," I said. "A house is a clear sign of success, isn't it?" he said. He was right. The new house is amazing. It's spacious, beautiful, and comfortable. My workroom is bigger now, so I can fit a large desk and work more comfortably. This has made me more productive, and I'm thankful for that. But I'm still anxious about our monthly mortgage payments. My husband doesn't seem to understand that we're paying off a long-term loan every month. The house is in his name, but he tends to overspend, so his account is often empty. Because of this, I have to transfer my income into his account just to cover the mortgage. I'm getting frustrated with him, so one day, I decided to talk about it. "Don't you think you've been spending too much lately?" I asked. "I need you to think about things like the mortgage for the house," I said. My husband frowned and replied, "What are you talking about? We've been living normally since we bought the house." "If that's the case, then there's no problem. You're just stressing over small details. And isn't it because you manage your money poorly that you're short? That's not my issue." "What? Wait a minute. I'm always trying to save money from the daily expenses with the money you give me, and I'm also using my own earnings to cover the mortgage and other costs. So please don't talk to me like that. What's your problem? Besides, the amount you're contributing isn't that much, so don't act like it's a big deal. The one who earns the most is the best, and that's me. Don't try to give me advice," my husband said, trying to shut me down. I was shocked by how my husband had changed. He used to be kind and caring, but now our relationship felt strained. We barely talked, and sometimes we didn't even greet each other. He worked overtime more than ever and came home late at night. I started to question if it was okay to continue living like this. We were just coexisting under one roof without meaningful conversations. Maybe it would be better to get a divorce. But if there was a chance to fix things, I wanted to try. After thinking it over, I decided to take the first step and reach out to him. But my efforts were crushed when I saw him in town one day. I had gone out to buy a birthday gift for a friend. It was a weekday, so my husband should have been at work. But instead, I saw him in town, dressed casually, walking with a young woman I didn't recognize. I was stunned and immediately thought he might be having an affair. To find out the truth, I hired a private investigator. After about 3 weeks, I got the results and went to the detective agency. It turned out my husband was indeed having an affair. The woman was his colleague, and their relationship had been going on for about 2 years. I finally understood why my husband had started spending so much and coming home late. It was because he was having an affair. I was furious, especially after all the verbal abuse he had directed at me. He was the one being unfaithful. I felt foolish for trying to protect his feelings and our marriage. I decided to stop doubting and take action right away. When I rushed home, my husband was sitting on the sofa watching sports. I stood in front of the TV and laid out the evidence of his affair in front of him. "Explain this," I demanded. At first he looked surprised, but his expression quickly changed. "Oh, that's Meg. She's my new wife." "New wife? What are you talking about?" "Well, now that you know, there's no point in hiding it. Unfortunately, you're no longer needed." "What are you saying?" "Frankly, I don't need you in my life anymore. But Meg doesn't want to do housework, so you can stay and take care of that for her." "What? Are you out of your mind? I would never do that." When I said that, my husband's face turned red with anger. "I'm the breadwinner here, so my rules are final. If he can't follow them, then it's divorce." Even though he was having an affair, he was still trying to control me. Why should I listen to him? "Fine, let's get a divorce." "Huh? You had an affair, so we can't stay married. Let's just get a divorce." He was surprised but soon agreed. "Okay, but don't come crying to me later. But you need to help me change the names on the utility bills and the car loans we just took out." I changed all the loans into my husband's name and got divorced. He probably thought it was over, but for me, it was just the beginning. You should realize how much I supported you. The day after the divorce was finalized, I was already settling into my new apartment. Then, I got a bunch of calls from my ex-husband. Since he hadn't paid me any compensation yet, I hadn't blocked his number. When I answered, he sounded flustered and said he needed to talk. I reluctantly agreed to meet him at a cafe, but he showed up with his mistress. "Well, you two seem to be getting along. What's this about? Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He looked upset and said, "Every month, I'm getting hit with a huge amount for loans. Why are the food expenses, car loans, utilities, and everything else so high? What are you trying to do by leaving all that on me? I divorced you and moved out, so it's only fair." "I don't have any other intentions," I replied. "Shut up. This is fraud. I'll sue you," he said. My ex-husband and his mistress glared at me, holding each other's arms. They both blamed me, but I couldn't accept their absurd accusations. It's your fault for not understanding the situation. I showed you the documents, didn't I? The house loan was in your name, so it's only fair you pay it. I've been transferring the necessary money into your account. How could you, with your small income, cover all that? As someone with a poor grasp of the situation, I explained calmly. I was working as a freelance engineer and making around $200,000 a year. Is that true? He asked, clearly shocked by how much I was earning compared to him. It didn't matter if he was surprised or not. What mattered was that I hadn't received proper compensation yet, so I planned to pursue it through a lawyer. Are you trying to swindle money from us? He demanded. I'm just claiming what's rightfully mine. I'll also be making claims against your mistress, I said. I received compensation from both of them for the emotional distress they had caused me. My ex-husband's mistress was devastated to find out he wasn't using his own money to pay for the loan. The next day, she disappeared from his life. Their affair ended just like any other when the money ran out. Now my ex-husband lives a lonely life, struggling to pay off his loan and make ends meet while commuting between work and home. He's facing the consequences he deserves, but he couldn't handle it and started spreading news about his affair at work. His mistress claimed he was abusing her, leading to a messy quarrel. Since neither of them was credible, no one believed their claims. His financial troubles worsened, and he was eventually demoted and received a pay cut due to his inability to focus on work because of his mounting debts. It's all his own fault, and frankly, he brought it on himself. As for me, I was nervous at first when I moved into my new high-rise apartment, but now I'm enjoying my life here. I'm not interested in marriage or romance for a while, but that doesn't mean I want to be alone forever. If I meet someone in the future, I hope we can build a supportive relationship based on what I've learned from this experience. For now, I'm focusing on working hard and making the most of my time for myself. After my divorce from my husband was finalized, I moved in with my daughter, Natalie. About 6 months later, something unexpected happened. It was my day off, and I was relaxing at home with Natalie when I got a call from my mother. She told me that my ex-husband and his mother had shown up at my parents' house uninvited. I quickly got dressed and went over there. When I arrived, I found my ex-husband and his mother sitting on the sofa in the living room, waiting for me. I had no clue why they were there. "Why are you here at my parents' house?" I asked. My ex-husband, John, surprised me by saying, "I want you to return the money you owe me. My name is Aaron. I'm a 40-year-old office worker. I was married to John for 14 years, and our daughter, Natalie, was born around the time we got married. She's now in the 8th grade. We were a happy family, and I felt sure that we would always have a loving home together. I met John on a blind date and was instantly drawn to his friendly, kind, and cheerful nature. He liked me too, and we stayed in touch throughout high school. We shared our contact details and started dating. After a few dates, a year later, he proposed and we got married. I loved him deeply and was thrilled when he asked me to marry him. I had a close group of friends from high school, and we always came together for big events. When I told them I was getting married, they were all excited and congratulated me. They all came to our wedding and talked about wanting to get married too. Over time, one by one, all my friends from the group got married, and eventually, everyone in our circle was married. We laughed and joked about how our group of friends had all suddenly become adults, with everyone now being married. Then, when I got pregnant, my friends started getting pregnant too, and before long, we had turned into a group of moms. It felt like we were all going through life together, and I knew we would stay close friends forever. I was happy being both a wife and a mother. I also enjoyed my job. After college, I started working in the planning and development department of a big company, and my days were very busy. The job was challenging but very rewarding, and I learned something new every day. One of my mom friends, who stayed at home, once told me, "You're really a workaholic, Aaron, but you also have a great family life. It's like you have 2 lives or something." My friend says I'm a very strong woman, but I really wish I had the endless energy of a strong man. Both John and Natalie helped me unwind and relax at home after a long day at work. When I got home, I would say, "I'm home." Natalie would respond with a cheerful, "Oh, Mommy, welcome home." When she was younger, she would greet me with a big smile and a hug, which made all my tiredness disappear for the day. John would also help me relax. After Natalie was born, John quit his job and started working part-time so I could continue working at my company. He took a job at a cafe and took care of picking up and dropping off Natalie. When I came home, he always had dinner ready. After a long day at work, it's tough to cook, so coming home to a hot meal was a huge relief. John's cooking helped me feel relaxed and refreshed. I would take baths with Natalie and we chat about our day. My life was fulfilling both at work and at home. I could manage it all because John and Natalie were so supportive of my job. Their kindness made me even more dedicated and passionate about my work, and as I achieved good results, I got promoted. With the promotion, I started working more overtime and often came home quite late. By then, Natalie was older and understood the demands of my job, so she could handle some things on her own. John also began working more hours at the cafe. Lately, I've been enjoying exploring different coffee shops and buying their coffee beans. I picked up some today, along with cakes from a new bakery. I suggested we have them with coffee. John has really gotten into coffee. He's been learning about roasting beans and trying different types at his cafe job. That's why he makes such great coffee at home. John and Natalie were both very understanding about my dedication to work. But I didn't notice that our family was slowly starting to drift apart. I first realized something was wrong when Natalie came to me with a concern. "What's up? You wanted to talk about something," I asked her. "Well, the other day, when I went to see a movie with friends from school, I saw Dad with another woman," she said. I was shocked. "What?" Natalie continued. "They weren't holding hands or anything, but they seemed a bit close. Lately, I've noticed Dad talking a lot on the phone before you get home. Sometimes he's so focused on his phone that he doesn't really listen to me. He looks happy while on his phone. At first, I thought he was texting or talking to you, but after seeing him with that woman, I'm starting to wonder if he was talking to her instead." Natalie looked really sad as she spoke. She was already in middle school and sensitive to these kinds of issues, so I knew she wouldn't be able to handle this alone. I was also shocked. The thought that John, who I believed always put Natalie first, might be having an affair was heartbreaking. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't realize we were making you feel this way. I've been too focused on work, haven't I?" Natalie reassured me. "No, it's okay that you work hard, Mom. Don't feel bad about that." I was grateful for her understanding words. "Thank you, Natalie. I'll talk to your dad about this. If it turns out he's having an affair, I think I'll have to get a divorce. Is that okay with you?" She nodded. "I don't like the idea of Dad having an affair. Just knowing that and still being with him would make me feel bad." Seeing Natalie so upset made me realize how much I had neglected my family. I knew I needed to get to the bottom of this issue, especially since Natalie had the courage to bring it up. I hired a private investigator to look into John's possible affair. The results were shocking. John was indeed having an affair, just as Natalie said, and there was photographic evidence to prove it. What stunned me the most was who his affair partner was: Stacy, one of my high school classmates and a member of our mom's group. I was more surprised by this betrayal from a friend I trusted than by John's affair itself. Stacy, a stay-at-home mom and the last to marry in our group, had a young child of her own. Yet she was involved with John and neglecting her own child. When I saw the evidence, I was overwhelmed and couldn't move for a while. If I hadn't been alone in my room, Natalie might have stumbled upon those photos, causing even more turmoil in our family. I wasn't ready to confront John yet, and I definitely couldn't let Natalie see these pictures. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. Then, another friend from the mom's group told me she had changed jobs, which gave me the idea to suggest a get-together. I figured it would be a good chance to see Stacy without her knowing I was aware of the affair. The get-together was planned for 3 weeks later. During that time, I quickly hired a lawyer and began preparing for the divorce. I briefly informed Natalie about what I had discovered and that her dad and I would be getting a divorce. We spent our days off together looking for a new apartment. The day of the get-together finally arrived. I started by asking my friend about her new job, and then we all shared updates about our lives. Stacy still didn't seem to know that I was aware of her secret, and we had a normal conversation. "Everyone's working, so it's good that things are changing," Stacy said. "I'm just a housewife, so I'm stuck in the same routine." "Well, you don't have to work, Stacy, because you have a husband who supports you," one of my friends replied. "I do appreciate my husband, but sometimes I feel a little bored," Stacy admitted. It was time to confront her about the affair. "So, is that why you're having an affair with other people's husbands?" I asked. Stacy and the other friends froze at my comment. Aaron, what do you mean by that?" Stacy asked, her face going pale. "Well, it seems that Stacy is having an affair with my husband John," I said. "What? No way. You must be joking," the other friend said, trying to defend Stacy. Since my friends were protecting her, Stacy took advantage of it. "That's right, Aaron. What are you talking about all of a sudden?" "You must have confused me with someone else," Stacy said, trying to deflect. "Oh, really?" I replied. "Then why don't you all take a look at this?" I pulled out the photos from my bag and laid them out on the table. My friends stared at the photos in shock. "Oh my gosh," they gasped. "Stacy, why?" they asked. Stacy, clearly caught off guard by the evidence, covered her mouth with her hand. "I'm so shocked. Why did you have an affair with my husband?" Stacy seemed to realize there was no way out. "I'm really sorry. I happened to walk into the cafe where your husband works. I didn't know he worked there at first, but I started going there regularly. My husband provides for me, but he's been neglecting me since we got married. I was feeling lonely." Stacy started to cry as she spoke, but even though she had her reasons, having an affair is unacceptable, especially with a friend's husband. I remained calm and composed, not letting her tears affect me. "I'm sorry to everyone else, but I need to tell Stacy that I'm going to pursue alimony from her," I said. "I also sent a certified letter about this to your mailbox today, Stacy. Your husband should have already seen it." "Oh no," Stacy said, looking worried. "How could he do something so terrible?" she asked, still in shock. "It's far worse to have an affair with a friend's husband when you're married and have a child of your own. You need to face the consequences and make amends for what you've done," I said. Stacy turned pale and nodded. One of my other friends added, "We really can't trust you anymore, Stacy." We left the restaurant, leaving Stacy behind. Now that I had dealt with her, it was time to confront John. I was pretty sure Stacy had already contacted him about what happened. When I got home, John met me at the door, looking panicked. "What have you done?" "I just got a call from Stacy. Are you really making our affair public? How could you be so terrible? You acted like a good husband, but you were cheating on me." "No, that's not. But Stacy has a family too. How could you expose her like that? It's ridiculous." I responded, "It seems people who have affairs think alike. You believe that as long as the other person doesn't find out, it's not a big deal. But what you did was wrong, and it all needs to be revealed as part of your punishment. That's why I'm going to divorce you and seek alimony and child support." With clear evidence of the affair, John couldn't deny what happened and agreed to the divorce. However, he was hesitant about paying alimony and child support. When I hired a strong lawyer and made it clear that I was ready to take the case to court, he finally agreed to pay. So I divorced my ex-husband, sold a house we had been living in, and moved into a new apartment with Natalie. I also pursued alimony from both John and Stacy and received $30,000 from each. Additionally, I secured child support from John. Once everything was settled, Natalie and I started our new life together. The experience was very traumatic for me, but over time, my wounds began to heal. However, about 6 months later, another issue arose. I was relaxing at home with Natalie on my day off when I got a surprising call from my mother. She told me that my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law had shown up at my parents' house and forced their way in without permission. My father was out, so my mother called me in a hurry. I quickly got ready and went to my parents' house. When I arrived, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were sitting on the living room sofa waiting for me. I had no idea why they were there. "What are you both doing here at my parents' house all of a sudden?" I asked. My ex-husband then shocked me with his next words. "I want you to give me back the money you owe me." "Huh? I never borrowed any money from you. I paid $15,000 for our wedding, remember? You were the one in charge of the wedding, so that money was lent to you. Now that we're divorced, you're claiming it was all a fraud. Honestly, I could sue you for marriage fraud, but for now, all I want is that $15,000 back as a settlement." He made an unreasonable request. My ex-mother-in-law also insisted that I pay him as soon as possible. After the divorce, I knew that John had taken a full-time job at the cafe where he used to work, but the pay there wasn't much. It seemed he was struggling financially, which might explain his unreasonable demands. Well, let me remind you that we both were equally involved in the wedding. and I paid more of our living expenses than you did. So $15,000 is just a small part of what I contributed. Don't bother me with such unreasonable demands." I tried to get them to leave, but they didn't budge. Just then, my father came home. He had apparently received a call from my mother and rushed back. "What are you guys doing here?" my father demanded. My ex-husband explained the same thing to my father, clearly afraid of him. My father listened quietly but was clearly furious and shocked by John's unreasonable demands. "It's your fault for having an affair in the first place. If you're going to make such outrageous demands, get out of here," my father said. He tried to kick them out, but my ex-husband fell to his knees and begged, "Please, Aaron, lend me money. Not only are you demanding alimony, but Stacy's husband is also after me and I can't afford it. Even $10,000 would help." It was shocking to see him begging for money in such a situation. I told him coldly, "No, I can't do that. Go home." But my ex-mother-in-law insisted, "You're also responsible for what happened. You should lend him the money." The situation was escalating, so my father said, "Fine, I'll get the money. Just wait here," and went to another room. "Hey Dad, what are you doing?" I hurried after him, and my father grinned. "Well, I have plenty of money. Since we have it, why not give it to them?" he said, opening the closet and pulling out some cash. This should be interesting, I thought. My father put the bills in an envelope and handed it to John. Satisfied with the fake money, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law left with pleased expressions. As soon as they were gone, I locked the door and called the police. The two must have realized the money was fake as soon as they stepped outside because they came rushing back, banging on our front door. "Hey, what's going on? This is Monopoly money. I don't want this fake cash," John shouted angrily. I laughed and responded through the door. "Since we have so much money, I thought I'd share it with you." John exclaimed, "You've got to be kidding," and started banging even harder on the door, kicking it with his feet. They didn't realize their actions were only making things worse for them. As John and his mother were kicking the door, the police arrived and caught them in the act. Neighbors gathered around, and many witnessed John and his mother getting arrested. In the end, John didn't get any money but was fined for the arrest and had to pay for the damage to our front door. Additionally, one of the people who saw the arrest was a regular at the cafe where John worked, and news spread quickly. As a result, John was fired from his job. Now, John is struggling to find work and has moved back in with his parents. His in-laws are covering his alimony and child support payments for him. I've also filed a restraining order against my former in-laws. If anything happens, my family can call the police, and they will respond immediately. Now I'm happier than ever with Natalie. I'm committed to working hard and enjoying watching my daughter grow up. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.